Let's go.
All right, and welcome to the second episode of Fight Night Picks Live. I'm your host, Craig Allen. Joining me is the host of the Talktagon, Mr. Ty O'Keefe. Ty, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. How are you? I really appreciate you having me on again. It was a pretty good card today.
Yeah, it was a really good card. I just checking there on YouTube. We're good to go. We're rolling. I'm going to pull up the live chat. If anybody listening wants to comment in, if you got something to say, let me know. Let both of us know. We'd love to answer your questions. And yeah, I mean, I think it was a really good card. Afterwards, they came out and said it was the fifth biggest or most attended card in UFC history, which was a pretty big surprise to me. Were you surprised at all?
No, only because the fact that it was the Russian premiere, and we know Russia's got a huge fan base of really passionate MMA fans, right? So I mean, in that sense, no. But at the same time, I really think the UFC they should have given them a better card. Not to knock any of the fighters or the athletes who busted their butt to get on this card. They all performed beautifully. There was a great main event, even though it ended a little prematurely. Nevertheless, it was the Russian premiere, and that's a hotbed for MMA. So no, not really.
I mean, I threw out a tweet right before the main event. Obviously, I didn't focus too much on UFC Moscow this week. A lot of Bellator content, really heavy that way. But I figured, you know what, I'm going to give out my 2 cents and see how it's, see what people think. So I said Travis Brown, when he fought Alexei Oleinik, UFC 213, Oleinik threw a right overhand, knocked Brown down, finished him by submission. I kind of thought, well, that's probably the way that this fight's going to play out. I mean, I know Mark Hunt's got a good chin on him, but man, Oleinik threw a couple of hard lefts and kind of caught him. He was kind of wobbled going backwards, which it was surprising. I mean, they didn't look like hard punches. I mean, it wasn't like facing Alistair Overeem, anything like that, but he was able to get the finish.
Yeah, and I kind of thought Mark Hunt would last longer if he was going to lose this fight, but it was very clear, right? In the beginning of the first round, like obviously it's only a 1 round fight, but in the beginning of the fight, it seemed like the momentum was really with Oleinik, and Hunt didn't have it on his side at all.
I don't know. I think you're wrong.
But did you notice though? And I'm always wrong, so that's okay. But did you notice though the intensity it went to a different level that you didn't get in the co-main? As soon as the Blachowicz win was over, it was kind of, uneventful, whatever. I mean, it had potential to be a great fight. But when the main event started and those two guys entered the octagon, there was something where just the intensity went up, and I could feel it through my TV almost. And it seemed as though they'd been really waiting for this fight. And they got the finish. The crowd got the finish they wanted, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty surprised in the co-main. Nikita Krylov, obviously Ukrainian, but it came out this week that he decided to sign with Fight Nights Global because he wanted to make a bigger name for himself, which I thought was kind of odd. I mean, usually people want to go to the UFC to make a big name for themselves, not Fight Nights Global, but that was Krylov's strategy. I don't really think it worked. I mean, had the win over Maldonado in his last fight, it was this summer. So coming back to the UFC, getting a top 10 opponent in Blachowicz. And I mean, I had the Polish fighter, winning that fight. I had a good feeling he was going to win it. Even though Krylov, I mean, you saw it at the start of that fight, really karate type stance, was throwing a lot of hard kicks. And then Blachowicz able to just impose as well. I mean, he's had such a good ground game, such good submission skills lately, and able to get another win. I mean, who do you think he's going to fight next?
That's the big question. And regarding your comment about Krylov and the karate stance, for a second, it was like light heavyweight Wonder Boy.
Yeah.
For it really, it had the potential to be such a slugfest. The fact that he finished this fight so quickly, kind of, warrants his comments after the fact. He does want Cormier. He was already ranked 4th heading into this fight, right?
Yeah.
And when you're already ranked 4th heading into a fight of this magnitude, a main event or a co-main event rather, I think you have a right to call out people like that. We know he won't get Cormier. I think he may have hit the nail on the head with Gustafsson though. I think that might be the fight that the UFC would make. I don't think it's the best fight to make, but I could see the UFC going in that direction.
There's a lot of different fights that you can make a light heavyweight. I mean, as much as we talk about it and how poor of a division it is in the UFC, there's a lot of fights. I mean, Gustafsson, Cormier, winner of Smith and Uzdemir. You've got Manoa Santos. So there's a lot of different fights.
You just hit it on the head. The Smith, the winner of the Smith Ozdemir, that's who he should fight. That's a very good point. That's who he should fight.
I mean, it would be a good stylistic matchup, especially where Blakovic is so, like I said, submission heavy, and you're going to have a striker between Smith and Ozdemir. So, I mean, that's one that makes sense to me. I think for Daniel Cormier, whether it's a Lesnar matchup or like the pictures that have been coming out today, we see John Jones in Vegas. Maybe he's talking to the commission. What's going on there? But I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of different moving pieces right now in that light heavyweight division.
Oh, absolutely. Especially as you said, with the return of John Jones kind of looming over division. And I personally, and I think you would agree, we only are kind of this critical of like heavyweight division because we're so used to seeing it succeed and be the UFC's kind of flagship division for so many years. Liddell and Rampage and Rashad, and I mean so many great fighters kind of carried the UFC through its infancy in the early 2000s. And so now we have these high standards for the light heavyweight division, and they're just not being met. But maybe we have to re-examine them and realize that those standards are unrealistic at this point. But yeah, and aren't we supposed to hear something about John Jones' return? I know they're talking about, and I just make it clear right now before I answer that question. I don't think USADA would dirty its hand with John Jones with one fighter when it's a global organization just to get John Jones back in the octagon, unless John Jones is pulling out $1 trillion or something, maybe, and even then. So I don't think it's fair for us to question the integrity of USADA at this point. But yeah, we're supposed to hear in the next week. Is that not correct?
Well, I mean, there were pictures that came out today of John Jones facing off with Anthony Johnson, which, I mean, I love Anthony Johnson so much. Love watching him fight. So entertaining. I wish he didn't wrestle against Daniel Cormier, but one of the best guys out there. Now, whether he ends up competing at heavyweight or light heavyweight, that's kind of, we'll see what happens, I guess.
The former welterweight. I mean, that's just insane. But yeah, he's been talking about coming back and fighting, and a guy like that, who's such an elite athlete, you can never count him out, no matter how far, how long he's been away. And at the same time, the light heavyweight division and the heavyweight division are not as much at 205, but one or two punches does really change a fight. And when you have power like Rumble has, I mean, you can come off the pine and really make a difference. And he's earned a top 5 opponent, no matter who he fights when he comes back. He's earned that.
So, I mean, so many moving pieces in the light heavyweight division. If we just go back for a second, as far as the main event went, I mean, Mark Hunt took his gloves off in the ring. I guess Dan Hardy asked him if we're going to see him back in the octagon. Didn't really address the question. But as far as Alexei Oleinyk's concerned, who could you possibly see him fighting? Now, there's a lot of matchups that are already made in the heavyweight division, so I'll give you the 2 names that I think. Marcin Tybura is one of the guys that doesn't have a fight coming up. I think that makes a good stylistic matchup for Oleinik. But at the same time, Alistair Overeem. Now, at the very top echelon, Stipe and DC don't have fights. But Tybura or Overeem, those are kind of the 2 that I'm thinking of.
And I would agree. It seems like Tybura would be an issue just because after a win like that, Oleinik is going to want to fight forward, as they say. And so obviously Overeem is fighting forward, and unfortunately Tybura is not. And so I think that's going to come into play, play a factor in both his decision, what fight he accepts. He won a main event against a former interim title contender, a former title contender, a very dangerous heavyweight. But he's also 41 years old, and Hunt being 44. I mean, these guys are ageless, but there's a limit, right? So I think he's going to have to, despite the fact that Hunt was a former title contender, he's going to have to fight somebody who's done something more lately in order to really, really impact that title conversation and really get there. DC and Stipe, I think, are out of the question. What about the Derek Lewis fight? I know he lost to Derek Lewis earlier in his career, did he not?
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that he almost kind of mentioned in the post-fight speech. And I mean, of course, I don't speak Russian, but he kind of alluded, no, German, but not Russian. So he kind of alluded that he'd like possibly the winner of that fight. But at the same time, I don't know what I don't really know what they could do. And at the same time, the fight before Blakovic and Krylov, you had Shamil Abdurakhimov and Andrei Arlovsky. And I mean, that was a fight that was, I thought it was closer than the judges alluded to. I mean, it was 29-28 and then 2 30-27s for Abdurakhimov. I had it scored 29-28 for Abdurakhimov, but it was close. Andrei Arlovsky, for a while, kind of looked like possibly maybe he's reinvented himself. He's kind of this 2.0 type fighter. His boxing was really good. He was throwing a lot of combinations. There was a lot of speed punches. But I mean, in this fight, both guys were kind of fine in the clinch. They seemed to be all right clinching up. You could see Arlovsky was kind of looking for a knee at a couple points, knee to the head, that is. Didn't end up getting it. And then near the end of the fight, the accumulation of eye pokes and cut checks, he looked pretty upset, looked like he wanted to finish the fight, couldn't get a finish. So for Arlovsky, I don't know where he goes from here. Now he's clearly obviously not moving forward anymore with a loss to Abdurakhimov, a guy who was coming off a win over Chase Sherman, which to me, that doesn't really mean a whole lot.
No, it doesn't.
Abdurakhimov, I mean, he's not on that elite level, so I don't really know what a win for him means either.
And I gotta say, I was so impressed with Abdurakhimov strength on those few times at the end of the first round when he pushed Arlovsky, and Arlovsky basically went flying into the cage. And a couple minutes prior to that, when Arlovsky came in to close the distance, and Abdur, he just kind of pushed him with one hand and flattened Arlovsky again. It wasn't even really a punch, and it wasn't almost like he was checking his leg, but waiting for the leg kick. But I don't know. But he just flattened him, and he looked like a much stronger fighter in there than Arlovsky did. You can never count Arlovsky out. But yeah, that's a tough call. Who he's going to fight? He's going to want somebody bigger. I would like to see him test himself against a Derek Lewis type guy, and I know I just said that a minute ago. I would like to see him just because of the fact that I think he needs to, or maybe the Curtis Blades and Ngannou loser, maybe the loser of the Blades and Ngannou.
I don't know. I mean, right now Abdurakhimov ranked 14th. Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, Arlovsky was ranked 12th, and you're seeing Derek Lewis, who's ranked 2nd.
Yeah, but I don't agree with Derek Lewis being ranked 2nd, just because that winner over Ngannou was so uneventful. It wasn't decisive, and it may not be. It is the top heavyweight division, but it is getting deeper, and I don't think Lewis should be a 2nd-ranked contender at this point. We'll see what happens, but I think honestly, for today's winner, I really think that the Blades and Ngannou loser would be, and it would be a reach, but look what he just did, right? So why not?
Yeah, I mean, like we kind of said, Lewis has got the fight with Volkov, Ngannou Blades, Dos Santos, and Tuivasa. So I mean, that leaves Tabora, Hunt, Overeem,
and Overeem's a good option. And it's a very good point you're making, because Overeem is a guy who needs to get back in there and prove himself a little bit again. And he's not going to be able to do that he's not going to be a main event, type guy until he does that. And I think that where he almost got decapitated by Ngannou, that really damaged his standing in the heavyweight title discussion. So he's going to be fighting backwards, and so maybe that Overeem fight wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility.
Now, I mean, the first fight on the main card, you had 18-0 Alexei Kunchenko, former M1 global champion, taking on Thiago Alves. And actually, in that fight, it was scored a decision win for Kunchenko. I had it win for Alves. I thought he lost the last round. I wouldn't call it a 10-8, but it was definitely a 10-9. But, man, I had him in the first 2 rounds. He looked really solid. I know in his last fight he got knocked out against Curtis Millender, who's now ranked 15th in the rankings. But, yeah, I mean, Alexei Kunchenko, I was kind of singing his praises. 18-0, 26-0, whatever you are, to get to that point, you have to be a pretty damn good fighter, especially as a champion.
Absolutely.
But Thiago Alves, it was almost like a classic Alves performance. He threw those great kicks. He looked really fresh. I know the crowd booed at a couple of points, and I know we had the Peter Yan and Jinsu Sun fight before that, which was super exciting. One of the best fights I've seen this year. I mean, it was
considering the spread heading in on the money line.
Yeah, exactly.
That was not supposed to be that type of a fight.
100%. But you had that. Then you had the Murtazaliev fight with CB Dalloway. But yeah, I thought Thiago Alves looked great. I thought he deserved the win. Yeah. It was kind of a shame that he didn't get it. And then for Kunchenko, he's another one of those guys. Where does he go from here? Now he's 19-0 in a pretty stacked division in the UFC.
Yeah. And you can't discount. I think Alves gets overlooked a lot because he was a title contender and then it didn't work out. So it's kind of like you see him on a lot of prelim cards. A lot of people underestimate him, underrate him, and a win over him is not worth what it should be. You know what I mean? Like a win over Thiago Alves is definitely something that needs to be valued in the welterweight division. I think he got that decision. I would agree. He lost the last round. But I think a big part of the decision was the fact that Pacheco landed 41 significant strikes, or total strikes rather, to Alves hit, I think, only 21.
And
And he
he
had
pushed the pace too.
yeah, and he had the only takedown of the fight, which is crazy when you're fighting Thiago Alves. To only one takedown, and it wasn't from Alves. So I think those obviously played a huge factor in the judge's decision. But you're right. Where does he go? This is so deep. You got to wonder. I mean, do you think it's out of the realm of possibility to put him up against a guy between 10 and 15?
Well, see, that's what I was kind of thinking. And there's some fights to make there. I mean, Gunnar Nelson doesn't have a fight. Alex Oliveira does. Curtis Millender is a guy. I mean, he did get the win over Thiago Alves. Maybe that's a guy you give him. Or again, you know, I'm always singing the praises. You've got Vicente Luque waiting in the wings. He's under 15, but I'm sure Konchenko wants to fight higher. Again, he was the title holder in M1, so I feel like he almost kind of does deserve that, especially where M1's now not a feeder system, but they kind of are a feeder system now to the UFC in Russia. So it'll be really interesting. But I mean, above that, he did call out Donald Cerrone. But what if Mike Perry wins the fight against Cerrone coming up at the UFC's 25th anniversary?
If Cerrone loses, I still think that could be a fight that could be made. Just because the division is deep and Konchenko is kind of unproven at that, you know, against the guys in the division right now. He doesn't have a ton of wins over you know, noteworthy big name type guys. So at any point, I think Cerrone is still a possibility. I personally loved your suggestion of Gunnar Nelson, just because the fight it would make. The only issue with that is Gunnar Nelson wouldn't really win over Gunnar Nelson wouldn't really get Konchenko anywhere. Right? It would kind of just, I mean, it crack them into the top 15, but those aren't even the UFC's rankings, right? Those are media members who do those rankings. So when you consider that, what's really getting between 10 and 15 worth? And so I think both for him and for the main event winner tonight, I really think they're going to have to wait a while to get the fights they want to get.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, as far as, you know, we won't spend too much time in the prelims, but, you know, kind of like we said there, the Peter Yan Jinsu Sun fight. Jinsu Sun, a guy that most people had never heard of. Then it comes out that he's almost a protege of the Korean Zombie. And man, yeah, he was a true zombie. I mean, he walked through punches. He was smiling when he took them. And as far as you had mentioned, yeah, the spread, that was nuts too.
Yeah, I believe when I did the write-up for Fansided on Friday on the moneyline odds, I think he was either the second biggest or the biggest favorite on the card.
I think he was the biggest, yeah.
Yeah, and when you see, you know, spreads that are 900, you know, minus 900 or plus 900, it's like you wonder, is this something that for gamblers anyways, as an ex, you know, sports bettor myself, your mouth just salivates when you see stuff like that, because you're thinking automatically, no matter which way you're going, there's opportunity there in a spread like that. But man, yeah, that's what I love about the UFC and all MMA is you get spreads like that, and then you end up with fights like this.
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
what I mean? No other sport is like that. It's so rare, you know, unless you're talking Appalachian State, Michigan, college football a few years back, so upsets like that. It's so rare in other sports to get, you know, a huge underdog coming and putting on a performance like that. It seems to only happen in MMA.
I mean, there were some strange decisions too. I guess one of the ones that we already just kind of went over and almost missed it, and I'm sure you saw some of the highlights there on Twitter.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
The CB Dalla fight with Khalid Murtazaliev, yeah, that one, I was quite critical of it. Then I kind of backed up and said, hey, you know, basically everybody's human. We're all liable to make mistakes. But at the same time, CB Dalloway laid out at one point on his stomach, head down to the ground, almost like he was listening to a good slow jam. And he took some tough shots from the Russian fighter. And for some reason or another, Herb Dean decided not to end the fight. Then once the round was over, he went over to CB Dalloway's corner and said, hey, are you good to fight? Which was a strange question to ask. So I don't know what he was thinking. Hopefully there's no, you know, repercussions, because Herb Dean is truly one of the best referees out there.
As far as I'm concerned, he is the best right now for the last couple of years, and that's including John McCarthy. Herb
Yeah,
Dean is a very fair guy. But haven't we seen Herb Dean do this before
it's
recently?
happened before. There's been some questionable decisions before. Now, I will point out he is one of ACB's premier referees. They bring him in to just about every event in Russia. They make a big deal of it. They have autograph signings. He meets with fans. It's a big deal for Russia to have Herb Dean. So I was kind of surprised by the decision. Now, one of the things I didn't mention on Twitter, and it just kind of slipped my mind, I was talking about it. I was over at a friend's house watching this event. CB Dalloway's he's had the tough end of the stick 2 fights in a row. I mean, Hector Lombard, who's actually behind me on the wall there, decided to hit him hard after the bell when he already had him almost knocked out in the first round of his last fight, decided to punch him as the referee was going in, ended the fight, ended up losing by disqualification. So poor CB Dalloway, 2 tough fights in a row.
Yeah, and CB Dalloway is one of those veterans that he's going to have a fan base, whether it's huge or not, that's going to support him for every fight. And it's tough to see him lose like this. You know what I mean? Wonder what's next for him.
There's a lot of different fighters on this card that I'm wondering that same question. I mean, you talk about strange decisions. Rustem Kalibov fighting Cajun Johnson. And I sent out a tweet before, Cajun Johnson, obviously he's, what is he, vice president of Project Spearhead, the MMA Fighters Union that they're attempting to have. Co-owner of TriStar Vancouver, trains out of British Columbia, spends some time in Montreal with the TriStar staff there. And I thought he won the fight, but ended up losing by split decision. You have to wonder what's next for Cajun Johnson.
Especially because he was so close to the chopping block his last few times. And the UFC isn't very anxious to be in the Cajun Johnson business when he's, like he did at the UFC athlete retreat last year or the year before when he stood up and took a stand, and that caused some issues. And he has every right to do that as a fighter. This union thing is inevitable, but they need to get their stuff together and get this organized. Because Leslie Smith is just not to play on words, spearhead, but there's been some stalls. But anyways, yeah, Cajun Johnson has zero leverage because he is a voice the UFC does not want to hear. He has not been performing in the octagon, and he's literally living like, I know a lot of fighters do live fight to fight, but not to this extent. I don't think no matter what happens next, we're going to have Cajun Johnson around much longer in the UFC. I think he'll end up as kind of a Bellator guy, where he'll still have a huge platform to do the spearhead, to do everything else he wants to do. But I could see he just seems tailor-made for Bellator for me right now.
Which is totally fair because, I mean, the lightweight division in Bellator is one of the best divisions that they have. So there's a lot of different fights to make. And I'm crossing my fingers and my toes that we actually get to see Eddie Alvarez, Michael Chandler 3, but we'll see what happens there. The only other fight that I was a little surprised about, and it's not, well, it was based on how it was scored, but it was also based on a number of different factors. Mairbek Taisumov taking on Desmond Green. I mean, Desmond Green was involved in a deadly collision. It was about a month ago, and they spoke about it as he was walking into the octagon. Man, this had poor psychological effects on him. You kind of wonder where his head's at going into this fight. I was surprised that he kept the fight. He was going to stay in it, taking on a tough fighter in Taisumov, and Taisumov comes in 6 pounds overweight, which is absolutely ridiculous. And poor Desmond Green in a fight in February fought Michael Prazeres, who also came in about 5 or 6 pounds overweight. So you have to wonder what's next for Desmond Green. But at the same time, for Mairbek Taisumov, I didn't think he won the fight. And shame on you for coming into a fight 6 pounds overweight. You have one job to do, and that's make weight.
Yeah, and if you're not going to be able to make weight, then move up a division. I'm so sick of this going forward. And I noticed, and kind of stray for a second, I noticed the Bellator card next week has a couple of catchweight bouts, or 2 or 3 already scheduled ahead of time. Like, it's already set.
Yeah.
165, 170 fights. There's too much of this in MMA. And whether it's, you're missing by 6 pounds, 10 pounds, whatever, you're right. That's their job. And no one's forcing them. No one's putting a gun to their head and saying, hey, you have to fight in this division. So when someone misses weight with all the resources that the UFC has, especially with the Performance, the Athletes Institute that they have in Vegas, where any fighter can access that place, they have trainers there, and fighters do not have to pay for any of that stuff if you're on the UFC roster. There's no excuse for it. There is no excuse for it.
I think his thing, he's on what, a 6-fight win streak now, and it's the
I thought it was 5. Yeah, 5. Oh, I guess 6. Yeah, you're right. Yep.
6-fight win streak, and it's the 3rd longest in the division. I believe Khabib's ahead of him, and then there's somebody ahead of Khabib. So I think that maybe that's the reason why he's sticking around in lightweight. I mean, he probably would be a small welterweight just based on height, but
Yeah.
his legs really big. You know, a lot of power in those kicks. He threw a kick early on in the fight, and it was checked by Desmond Green. At the same time, it hurt him, and it almost spun him around. Like it was a hard kick. But yeah, if you're gonna fight in that lightweight division, I mean, guys, come on. Like, there's one job to do. And you said Bellator. I don't know exactly what weight the fight's going to take place at, but I do know I had a look at Bellator's website. It's between a light heavyweight and a middleweight, so we'll see where that is. But it does say catchweight bout, so it could be 190 or so.
Yeah, and you know, for Desmond Green, it's tough when you get a string of bad luck like this, and yet you're expected to come out and perform. People think, oh, 5-6 pounds isn't that much. Well, it is when you add another 24 hours of eating and hydrating, and all of a sudden you come into the octagon, and now you're not 6 pounds overweight, you're 20 pounds bigger than what you're supposed to be, or 15 pounds, or whatever it is. So I hope the UFC factors that into whatever decision they make about Green's future.
100%. And I mean, the rest of the card kind of goes as follows. You had Ankalaev win over Marcin Prachinio. You had Jordan Johnson getting another win. I mean, geez, he just keeps stringing them together. He's 10-0 now. Really special talent, great wrestling. Ramzan Emeev getting another win, another knock him around type decision.
I believe he was a huge favorite as well heading into it.
Was a big favorite going into that fight. And then finally, Merab Dvalishvili getting the win. I mean, everybody looks back at his Ricky Simone fight. I thought he won the fight. It was a weird decision to say that he was submitted against Ricky Simone. And for poor Terrion Ware, I mean, geez, just a murderer's row, the 4 guys he's faced in the UFC. And now he's 0-4. Fingers crossed they don't cut him. I mean, man, the guy puts up a fight every time, but that's a shame.
And we've seen other guys, you know, lose, and women, I'm sure too, lose 3 or 4 in a row and not get cut. So it's not like the standard rule that it used to be. It seems like 3 used to be the number, and you were gone no matter what, unless you were a former champion or a headliner or whatever. Now it's not so concrete, and thankfully it's not so concrete. So hopefully he'll be one of these people who they look at the caliber of opponents he's fought, they look at the circumstances he's fought under. They look at the fact that he hasn't said, okay, stop giving me these type of opponents. I'm not ready for this. He's been a gamer, and they keep him around because there's not enough of those guys right now. There just isn't.
And as far as, you know, kind of after the fight went, Dvalishvili called out Sean O'Malley, which, you know, he's got a fight against Jose Quinones coming up here soon, but that'd be a really good fight. 2 guys that are game, 2 strikers. And as far as the next couple of weeks go, next week you have Bellator, Brave, and LFA all on Friday. Not too many major events that I could see on Saturday. And then you've got, I believe there's Cage Warriors the week after, among others. And Bellator.
This Bellator card, Bellator 206, I believe.
Bellator 205 or 206? 205 is next Friday.
Oh, it is 205. Yeah. Okay, yeah. That card to me looks great, especially the main card. I'm definitely interested. And if anybody gets a chance to catch that, it's another great free MMA offering. So check that out definitely on Friday.
First one that you can catch on DAZN. Before we go into the huge rollout, and I'm sure everyone will hear more about it. I had a chance to talk to AJ McKee, Rafael Lovato Jr., and Patricky Pitbull, and you can find that on iTunes and Stitcher. It was on the audio podcast. So yeah, it's going to be a great event. At the same time, the week after, September 29th, you have Bellator's return to their hometown of San Jose, California, and you've got Rory McDonald taking on Gegard Mousasi for the middleweight title. You've got the 4th fight between Vanderlei Silva and Rampage Jackson, among other good fights. It's a really good card.
Yeah, and I'm, you know, I love watching Rampage fight anybody at this point. You know, just he's a character in terms of his pre-fight. You know, his pre-fight talk a lot of times can be entertaining, and I agree that it's gotten to the point where 1 or 2 more of these, it's time to hang them up. But I'm still tuning in. I'm not interested in seeing Liddell Ortiz except for to see where Liddell is at, just because it's been so long, and he's, you know, one of my all-time favorite fighters. I love watching Chuck Liddell fight. But I'm interested to see where he's at, because Tito Ortiz has been somewhat active in the last, you know, compared to what Liddell has been, right? So that should be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see what happens. I'm going to be watching all the fights. Same as tonight, I'm going to be watching Triple G Canelo. And for anybody out there that was looking at the lines, they're pretty close right now. And again, like I'll look at the lines just to kind of see what people are thinking, see you know, maybe there's a consensus favorite there that I wasn't aware of, but they're pretty close. And then I see Canelo faint fall down there at the weigh-ins, which is kind of worrisome, but I guess we'll see what happens in that fight.
Yeah, I'm going with Triple G. Just because I think he's just a better fighter. But it should be fireworks. And the boxing world is just sitting on the edge of their seats right now for this rematch. It's definitely going to be one of the. Do you think it's the biggest fight of the year in boxing?
I don't think it's the biggest fight of the year because earlier on today, Mayweather Pacquiao 2 was announced. So
Yeah,
I uh,
that's
I had
cash
Manny
grab.
I had Manny Pacquiao going into the first fight, and then it comes out that he had a separated shoulder going into it, or he separated it during the fight. Which
Yeah,
no, he had it before he was going into
yeah,
the
oh yeah,
fight,
he had it beforehand. Yeah,
which is totally unfair, especially to the community that throws down hard-earned money on these things. So that was a shame. I'm looking forward to the fight. I think Manny Pacquiao still has it. Of course, he's been much more active, continues to fight, whereas Mayweather's taking money fights against Conor McGregor, which is just ridiculous. But yeah, as far as Triple G Canelo is concerned, I have Triple G as well. I think he obviously won the first fight, but at the same time, judging in boxing is ridiculous and can be totally rigged. So who knows?
yeah, that's the thing. I'm not interested into it in it at all because I think it's just a cash grab by two fighters who need to hang up their gloves for good and be done with it. But I'll be paying attention to some extent, but definitely will not watch that fight. Just out of I'm protesting. I'm pro enough of this meaningless fights because it's not going to mean anything.
It
It's
doesn't
not going
mean
to
a
mean.
whole lot. It means they're probably not going to get $100 out of you, which probably won't actually hurt. It would hurt you or I, but it won't really hurt them too much. I'm sure they're not hurting for $100.
Yeah, and the thing is that these guys have made so much money, throughout their careers and everything, and you wonder why does the boxing world want to see this? When it means nothing, and we're not seeing them in their prime, we're not going to see them, even close to at their best. I mean, Manny Pacquiao is more worried about playing basketball and being a politician, and he does a lot of great things in his other life. That's great, but let's just I see a fight like this, and I think it steals the spotlight from younger guys who should be getting it. That's it. And
There's so many younger fighters that are
yeah,
deserving of the spotlight.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you think
And the heavyweight division, by the way, seems to be the most exciting in boxing again, finally for the first time in years.
Wilder and Fury and Povetkin and Joshua and
Just
Hurd and the two
yeah,
like Charlo
yeah,
brothers, and there's so many other good fighters. Vasily Lomachenko. I mean, there's so many,
yeah,
like we've heard. You want to talk about crossover between MMA and boxing? Lomachenko and TJ Dillashaw trained together, and
yeah,
Dillashaw said both of those guys have had so many good things to say about each other. So it's good to see that. Again, I think that training lab, you got TJ Dillashaw, Dwayne Ludwig. There's so many fighters. Juan Archuleta in Bellator that train
yeah. There was
there.
a UFC fighter who fought last weekend and the weekend before who trains up there as well with Dillashaw. Yeah, it's a growing team, but it's definitely a spot to be in, and you cannot underestimate the results that Dwayne Ludwig has helped Dillashaw achieve.
And it's
You know
almost
what I
like a
mean?
money ball type approach, like in baseball. I mean, they're looking at stats, they're hooking these guys up to computers, they're monitoring
Yeah,
heart rates. I mean, it's good to see what they're doing, and it's really exciting. And as you see those guys grow, it'll be interesting to see what happens with different teams, especially Team Alpha Male. And I'm sure the rivalry will just keep on growing.
yeah, and Team Alpha Male is I don't know. I think if now that Cody Garbrandt's lost, I think they're going to lose. They're losing interest in this rivalry just because it's not going to really be good for business anymore. You cannot underestimate when a guy like TJ Dillashaw trains with Lomachenko. He is one of the best strikers in all of combat sports. He's so underrated, and so many North Americans don't know about Vasily Lomachenko. They just don't know about him,
Go
right?
and look.
So yeah,
Go and look at his amateur record. I mean, the
oh
guy
yeah,
had tons and tons and tons of fights. And I know in his last fight he got dropped at one point, but he came back and ended up winning the fight. And he was a huge favorite in that one. So I was pretty surprised. I watched that one live when he got dropped. But yeah, as far
yeah,
as UFC Moscow went, I think it was a really good card. I think it was great for the UFC's expansion into Russia. I think they're doing it the right way. Sometimes when you go into different countries, you have to form partnerships and alliances. And I think with the M1 deal, they're only going to get top talent coming out of M1. I mean, one of the guys that I'd be really excited to see would be Anton Vyazegin in the heavyweight division. Just fought Sergey Hartanov here recently, and didn't end up getting the win. He poked Haratanov's eye. You go back and watch the fight. I don't think it was an eye poke, but he's a really young guy, an exciting guy to watch in the heavyweight division. And I think UFC's first event in Russia went well.
Definitely, definitely. And I think it went better than expected. I know I was critical of the card heading into the weekend. I'm still critical of it because I believe the fans in Russia deserved a little bit more. But man, they made the most of it, and it came off without a hitch. And obviously, the UFC is going to make some money. Fighters were happy, fans were happy. Nothing really to complain about. And considering some of the other free fights we've had in the last 6 months, a year, smashing success. And I just think the next move to Russia is obviously pay-per-view from here, and they validated that today.
Yeah, I think they came out after the event. They were asked if they'd hold a pay-per-view and whether or not the time difference from Russia to North America would be an issue. But I personally like these cards. Where I'm in the Atlantic time zone, I'm an hour ahead of Eastern time. So for me, it's great. Prelim started, I believe it was 11:45. So, I mean, really easy start. It's almost 7 o'clock here now. I can enjoy my entire Saturday night, watch the Triple G Canelo fight. So I'm on board with it. But yeah, I think it was a great first foray, and hopefully we can see some more events from Russia.
And let's not forget, we got it pretty good because there's most of the fights we get in North America, you got people in England and Ireland having to watch them at 2, 3 in the morning. Yeah. And so, we've got it very good. And hopefully this DAZN deal with Bellator expands, makes it more accessible, and we see more of Bellator, because Bellator definitely deserves a spotlight that they have never had before. I just think that they've got more talent than they've ever had. They've got a deeper roster. And I know we're straying here from what the point is. It's worth saying, I really think for the first time that Bellator is a real competitor. And I know Joe Rogan said not yet, and obviously the UFC is going to win these battles, but you finally have a time where a Bellator champion could honestly, like McDonald Woodley, that doesn't have to, how many times does that happen where we've had a Bellator champion who could probably beat, or at least has a very good chance or an even shot at beating the UFC champion in the same division, right? How many times we had that?
Exactly.
Not very often.
I think whether it's Gegard, whether it's Rory, even Ryan Bader, I think Ryan Bader, leaps and bounds better than he was at one point in his career when he was with the UFC, when he was stuck in that kind of top 5, top 10, and he was so wrestle heavy. Now he's finishing guys. He's got a lot of power in his punches.
People think that he wouldn't get better because he went to Bellator, right? They think, okay, you're going backwards. I think the magnitude of fights he's had and the spotlight he's had and the opportunities he's had in Bellator has fueled his progression and turned him into a far more dangerous opponent than he was under the UFC banner. He is a light heavyweight champion, and I'm not saying, he could knock out Daniel Cormier, whatever, but I would like to see who, I would like to see who Bader would. I want to see a UFC Bellator champion versus champion. That's the dream scenario, right?
That'd be awesome. And for me, it'd be Julia Budd and Cyborg. But yeah, I've got some different Bellator stuff in the background. We got Ryan Bader behind me. I've got Will Brooks when he was champ down below my shoulder. Some different Bellator stuff. But as far as Fight Night Picks is concerned, you had a Bellator 205 preview show coming out on Friday with Patricky Pitbull, AJ McKee, Rafael Lovato Jr. Going into next week, I've got some tricks up my sleeve, some more Bellator content heading into Bellator 205 and the Bellator 206 card, the really big one from San Jose. Kind of more of a, here we are, here we go. This is a big card, and hopefully they're able to stack some more cards. I know 207 and 208 look really good so far. Ty, where can people find you online? Where can they find your content and your articles?
You can find me at Above the Fold Ty on Twitter. You can hit me up on Facebook under Ty O'Keefe. I think we're going to dive into Instagram at some point here. I'm going to do that finally. Also, I have a YouTube channel just started out where we've uploaded a bunch of content from our audio-only content from Dialogue. And so we got that for the Toctagon, which you co-host with me, and all 5 rounds. We made our YouTube debut this week. But really, I just want to give myself a shameless plug for next Tuesday. I'm going to be talking to, and you're one of them, 5 separate new voices in MMA media. 5 separate 15-minute segments, and we're going to talk about the 10 most impacting, most important, most significant storylines in MMA. Each writer, I'll co-host with the writer for each of the 5 shows, a different writer, a different new voice in MMA. I know you're going to be my first guest. We're going to talk about 2 topics and go down the line from there, and I'm really looking forward to this. I think it'd be a great opportunity to see some of these new voices kind of contrast against each other. see how their opinions vary and differ. Obviously, you have to be in that group, so I appreciate you coming on. But yeah, and that's going to be. Stay tuned to my Twitter account for the exact details and the guest lineup and the times for that at Above the Fold Tie.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much for coming on the second episode of Fight Night Picks Live. I'm looking forward to doing more of these shows on the weekend. Dress down a little bit, don't do my hair, wear the hat. It's a lot of fun. And
you're a handsome man, Mr. Allen. You're a handsome man. You don't got to worry about that. But yeah, I tell you what, you get any bigger, I mean, there's gonna be makeup artists behind you with lights and stuff pretty quick.
We'll see what happens. But yeah, more episodes of the Toctagon coming up here soon. Looking forward to coming on the call-in shows on Tuesday. And yeah, stay tuned for Fight Night Picks and Ty O'Keefe articles and news and different things coming out this week. So we'll see you again next week.